All right, so we are on the time value of money, and to be honest with you guys, it has been a long time since I did these things. I know I did them as an undergrad in my corporate finance class, and I definitely did them in my PhD program, but with variables and not numbers. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting for me to revisit this skill. But basically, present value analysis is what we're talking about. So, you know, when someone wins the lottery and they can either get an immediate payout or they can get like a series of payouts, and you always think, why would anyone ever wait? This addresses the decisions in terms of like what things would be worth in the future. True story. I was on a boat down to Key West and we met this man. We're talking to him, he's this old guy, and about an hour into our conversation, we were all very bored, he reveals to us that he won $1 million in the lottery. You know, we were super interested in what happened, and he told us the whole story. And by the time he took the money now, right, because he was an older guy, he didn't want to take the further payout. By the time he took the penalty for getting it all now and had to pay taxes on it, I think he only had $200,000 left. So what he did is he paid off his apartment and he bought a used Toyota Celica convertible because he'd always wanted a convertible. So there you go. Time value of money. Basically, it's a bunch of equations. So if we have a single future value, like you can get paid $10,000 in 10 years, the amount that would have to be invested today at the prevailing interest rate to generate that future value is given here. So like if I say, and I think my example is, you can get $10,000 in 10 years at a 6% interest rate. What is that money worth today? So we'll do an example in a second. The book also has this equation. I don't know how helpful it is. The present value reflects the difference between the future value and the opportunity cost of waiting. So if that makes sense to you, go for it. So let's just think of an example here. Look, that was correct. That's what I was saying. What is the present value of $10,000 in 10 years, assuming a 6% rate of interest? So what I would probably do if I was you is pause and try to answer this yourself. All right, so here's the answer, unless I had a typo, which I sometimes do. So if I ever have the wrong answer, please tell me. You really just plug it in. $10,000 is the future value, 0.06 is the rate of interest, and then N is the number of years, which is 10 years. That ends up being $5,583.47. So imagine if you won the lottery, right, and you could either have $6,000 today or $10,000 in 10 years, and you assume a 6% rate of interest, you should take the money today for $6,000. So it's a helpful skill. It's really just plugging into an equation. And just so you guys know, when you do your exams, they're always obviously going to be open book, so you don't need to waste your time memorizing equations. All right. Let's see here. Would you rather have $1,000 in 2 years or $800 today? Assume the rate of interest is 7%. Historically, just so you guys know, the stock market has averaged something like 7%, so that's a reasonable rate of interest to assume if you're thinking of stock market. All right, you might want to pause. It's better to wait. So what you would do is you would take $1,000, that's the future value, use that 7% rate of interest, 2 years, and that's $873. Now this can get more complicated, and it will in a second here, but one thing to note is that we're assuming an annual rate, right? Like it's compounded annually. The other thing we're assuming is no discount rate. So there's something in economics, which is basically how much you value now over the future. Really interesting study a few years ago about different languages. So if you study languages, linguistics, there's certain languages that don't differentiate between future and present tense that much, like the Chinese language. And so, like, I'll say, I am going to go to the doctor next week. In some languages, it's I go to the doctor, like it's more in present value. So it was Chen was the author. So he actually looked at the correlation between discount rates and the way languages are set up. And he discovered that languages like Chinese, people actually value the future more. So like if you're not distinguishing between the present and the future, you care more about the future. With that said, we have a linguist on campus, and I told her all about this. I said, Selena, there's this cool study. And she said, oh, that study, that is totally discounted in my world. So nevertheless, a discount rate is like if we were doing a big macroeconomic model or something with the future, we would assume some rate where people they care more about stuff today. You can totally ignore what I'm saying. Just note that this is a simplified version. All right, so another thing we can do is we can have a present value of a stream of future values. So like I get $100 next year, $200 the year after, blah, 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 blah. Similar equation, you just add them up. So an example from the book here is to consider a project that returns the following income stream. Year 1 is $10,000, year 2 is $50,000, year 3 is $100,000. At an annual interest rate of 3%, what is the present value of this income? And so this is how you plug it in, year 1, year 2, year 3, and it ends up being $148,352. You have plenty of practice with this on the first homework assignment. The other thing I'm doing is I'm allowing 2 attempts at all the questions because homework, I think, should be a way to learn, not to test you. So you will get plenty of practice with this. All right, the net present value, I'm sorry, I don't care about that. This is one that I do care about. So sometimes you have something that continues indefinitely. So like you get $100 a year forever from some asset. One cool thing about math, when you have an infinite series like this, is it can be simplified into a super easy equation. This is really helpful in economics, in macroeconomics, when you talk about a multiplier. So a multiplier is like if the government passes some stimulus bill and people spend 90% of it, there's like these different rounds of stimulating the economy. And this is where we get the multiplier formula. But for our purposes, let's just go through a simple example. The value of a perpetual bond, that just means a bond that pays forever. Pays the owner $100 at the end of each year. The interest rate is 5%. Now that's not the interest rate on the bond, that's the opportunity cost interest rate. The value of that bond would be $2,000. So again, there's plenty of practice for you. It's really just a matter of getting used to using the equations. Your book also talks about using marginal analysis. I'm skipping that for now because trust me, we're going to get plenty of practice. So it was just worth mentioning that I'm skipping that. All right, so one thing that I wanted to finish this week with are the microeconomic stories. So as I said before, one of my goals for the class is that you get something useful out of it that you can bring into the classroom. There's so much to talk about with COVID and microeconomics that I thought it was worth bringing this in sort of in the first week. So what I want you guys to do is think about it. So maybe just jot down notes, brainstorm, whatever for a minute. What are some microeconomic things that have really been in the news? So I actually taught a whole class on the economics of COVID, and so I have a ton of these. Super interesting. But the first one is toilet paper, right? So in the beginning, I happened to go to Costco and buy toilet paper like a week before the lockdown happened. But there was an increased demand for toilet paper because people were working from home. And then the supply of toilet paper at home wasn't there because what was happening is the suppliers were making like the industrial grade for workplaces still, right? So it's this really interesting supply and demand thing. Cars, we know the car markets are going crazy. used cars have been increasing like 10%. So when people talk about inflation, which they are, right? The used car prices have just been crazy, and they've actually started to finally come down a little. But it's interesting to think about why the prices of cars are the way they are. And then, of course, we've got vaccines and masks and positive externalities. So positive externality, which we'll cover in this class, I think. If I forget and you want me to, just let me know. But basically, it's when we do something for ourselves and it benefits others. Once I told my students, I said, you know, when I shower, that benefits you guys because then I don't smell. But then I accidentally proved that I don't shower enough. So, economics humor. But basically, you know the drill. If I wear a mask, it helps you. If you wear a mask, it helps me. And what's going to happen is there will just, with positive externalities, always be too few of the things. And then what I want you guys to do, and this is super easy, again, I don't want to be wasting your time. I want you to, let's like make a list of other things that have happened. So maybe 1 or 2 sentences. One of the things might be, the price of oil futures went negative in April 2020. That's true. Or even something simpler like housing prices. So think of one and respond to one, or if you can't, or you can think of 2 or respond to 2. And a response seriously can be so easy, like, I totally forgot about that. I wonder if that fits with supply and demand. So basically, I just want us to be thinking about this. All right, so the next steps, we are using Connect, as I've told you about. I believe you have gotten an email. I checked with the graduate school on this with like the ISBN and instructions on getting reimbursed. What I did on Blackboard is I posted a tutorial on how to register for it. If you look in this folder where you found all the lectures, there is an assignment, and that's the one to click. But if it takes us another week, that's totally fine with me. So what I did is I extended the deadline on this first assignment an extra week. The other thing I want you guys to do is sign up for the topic slots. Let's see if I have this open. So I just have this Google Doc. I shared a link with you. And so just take a look. This is the week that you'll be doing the assignment where you're like leading the class. So let's say 2 people want to do supply and demand. Just put your names there. Some of you guys will have 2 people and some will just have 1. And I've also posted on the syllabus some examples of topic ideas, but I'm happy to help you come up with one. We really just want to get the semester planned at this point. Okay, so that's all. This is the first week. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. I suspect there's going to be kinks to be worked out, so please just communicate with me if something's unclear. But that's it. I hope you all have a wonderful first week of classes.